welcome to our new in-between season secondary show, after show. It's after dark. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in Aaron's backyard.
In fact, it is.
In this series, we're going to kind of dive deeper into the themes that we've been talking about across the last 6 episodes in a more relaxed setting.
Indeed.
You can check out this video along with a bunch of subsequent videos that will be coming out over the next couple weeks in between now and season 2 of Loki, I guess.
Yep. We also have content coming up for What If, so make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, like, comment, and share this video. It really helps us out a lot.
We also have a Patreon if you'd like to help us out a little bit more. Patreon.com/MontresorMedia. Access is $1. You get access to this show early, plus everything else in our catalog. And all of that is extended versions of the episodes. Stuff that we have cut out of the episodes that don't make it to YouTube always make it to our Patreon.
And now, let's get into the theme. I think the name Glorious Purpose is really interesting because glory is generally a very religious term. You don't really see it outside of Catholicism, Christianity, like that general umbrella. It's always God's glory, God's light, things like that. And glorious purpose, thusly, always kind of strikes me as having a very religious bent. Yeah. And with all of the heavy Christian, especially Catholic, very Catholic symbolism in this, it really fits together so well.
Absolutely.
The idea of having this whole glorious purpose and then having this narrative that is, Loki is a character that is very analogous to Jesus, I would say, in these 6 episodes. Yeah. And that is not just me saying, oh yeah, there is actually evidence, lots of evidence.
Yeah. I don't know if it can be exactly one-to-one, but I can almost superimpose Jesus' death, journey into hell to get the keys to the gates of hell, reascent back to earth, and then ascent back into heaven. You can almost trot that into this story where he dies, for lack of a better word, at the beginning, being taken by the TVA, and then he actually gets pruned at a certain point, going into the void or hell, and defeating I forget the exact canonical terms, but he basically gets the keys to hell, and that's...
I'm perplexed, because that's not what they teach in Catholicism or Episcopalianism. In Catholicism, really? Jesus dies, he ascends to heaven, he goes back, if I recall correctly. I failed a lot of my religion classes. I did pay attention, I just didn't give them the answers they wanted, but I'm pretty certain in Catholicism, this whole keys to... and going to hell and getting keys is not something I have ever heard before, and I have been put through a lot of church. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's like direct. I mean, also I come from like a literalist background, so like.
True.
But yeah, the 3 days that he's in the tomb is the three days that it takes for him to venture into the lowest pit of hell to get the keys. And this is also a different kind of hell than the hell that
humans go to.
That humans will eventually go to after the 1,000 years of peace and revelation. In that version, he goes to hell over those 3 days, then he comes back alive on earth, and then he ascends to heaven.
Gotcha.
So that's why I was looking at like him getting pruned, going to the void, and then defeating Goliath to get into what is like literally the closest thing to heaven we've seen in the MCU.
I was taking the void as a purgatory reference from Catholicism.
I could absolutely see that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, but like it's fascinating how well the Christianity, regardless of where Christianity, there is a metaphor that will work for you in Loki.
Yes.
And, just the whole, like, religious oppression, having religion being used against you, learning how to have a healthy relationship with yourself and religion after being queer, like, that is a huge queer theme in Loki.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
What I want to talk about first is Sylvie.
Yeah.
Sylvie is a really fascinating character to me. This is not the video where we're going to talk about whether or not this is good representation for gender fluid people or not. That's another video. We'll link it down below. For Sylvie, every time somebody calls her Loki, she responds very similar to how somebody who is a member of the trans community responds when you dead name them.
Yep.
There's just a complete disavowal from, anything associated with being a Loki. And that name, it just, like, it seems to to hurt her, and it really does seem to bother her.
Yeah.
And, you know, she says that Sylvie's an alias and stuff in that. Like, I think she's trying to make it to be something that it's not.
Yeah.
But rewatching it and, like, knowing, like, all of her situation and things like that and thinking about it, I'm like, oh, this is a dead name, like, situation. This is a dead name metaphor.
Right.
Which I love. Gender fluid people change the names all the time.
Right.
I didn't. You can do it, too.
I think that's an interesting read, especially when we think about later on, specifically in the last episode, as the rift is growing between Sylvie and Loki, that whenever Loki tries to empathize, it's through the lens of them both being a version of Loki.
Yeah.
And all the way up and until, I guess, the point where they fully separate, where she doesn't understand why he's not seeing things her way. And I think that was her, like, realization of, like, oh, I am like fully a different kind of person than a Loki at this point. I have changed enough over the course of my life and the last few days of this adventure that on an existential level, Sylvie is not Loki.
I actually had a different read.
Really?
I did. We're going to get into the cycle of abuse thing. But I believe that Loki, you know, he's been abused. He's been an abuser. And he kind of has that redemption where he realizes what he's done. He realizes that he's hurt people. And he starts to change. Sylvie really hasn't had that yet. She doesn't really... She's never cared who her actions hurt until she met Loki.
Yeah.
You know? And I just don't think that she's had enough character development to be able to see the good in people. We're going to talk about this. We've talked about it in other episodes. Projection. When you are a liar, when you are a deceitful person, when you are manipulative, that is all you can see in other people because that is all you give out. You assume that most other people are operating, at least to some degree, on the same level that you are and are being deceitful. When people are too nice to you, when people are too interested in you, when people are too honest in you, all of that stuff, just red flags.
Yeah.
I just don't think that she's gotten to the point where she's recovered enough from, like, basically being a narcissist abuser, but also having PTSD. Like, she has complex PTSD from being separated from her family as a child and being on the run. And as somebody who has complex PTSD from an incident that happened to me when I was a child, it is portrayed so well in this. It really does cloud your ability to trust people even when every single symbol is telling you that they are trustworthy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a really interesting read. Seeing the way that played out across the series too, like Sylvie's existed in Arrested Development because she's never had downtime. She's lived apocalypse to apocalypse, trying to not get caught. Yeah. And so I think hasn't really been a moment of extended peace for Sylvie to even look back and recognize that about herself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I would like to see next season is for her to get that time. And I mean, this is why, and I said this in our coverage of episode 6, this is why it didn't bother me. Like, why I didn't want them to get together in episode 6, because if they would have gotten together in any type of serious form, it would have failed because she's not ready. She hasn't been through enough yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the episode is obviously super full of Catholic metaphors. Every single one of them is. Just heavily. And I went to Catholic school, so I have been trained since a young age to identify such things. I was kind of trying to figure out, like, who everybody was supposed to represent, and it didn't occur to me until the very end that Loki was Jesus. I think, here's my thought. I think Kang is supposed to be God. And then you have Sylvie, who is like Judas Iscariot. And then you've got Mobius, who is Simon Peter. So let's start with Loki and all of the messianic symbology. So first, the very first episode, he grabs that Tesseract, and then he falls from the sky like Lucifer the Morning Star. Like, I have seen so many representations of Lucifer's fall from grace. That there's a Renaissance painting. We'll put it on screen. There's absolutely a Renaissance painting that looks exactly like that. If not 12 of them. And from there, I'm like, oh oh, this is a Lucifer narrative. Ooh, I'm interested. So that's what I was feeding my brain with. I'm like, oh, Lucifer's fall from grace. So then, after he gets arrested by the TVA, he runs into Casey, who is like the baddest bitch ever. And Casey's like, yo, check out these Infinity Stones I got. And in with the Infinity Stones, did not realize this initially, is a cross.
Yeah.
I did not notice that. I love the juxtaposition of power.
Yeah.
And perhaps powerlessness, interestingly enough. And the real thing for Loki is in the final episode, though. There's just so much. He always has done that pose. You know, that kind of braggadocious, like very mocking imitation of the Jesus pose. But in this episode, or in episode 6, you have the statue of Kang behind him. And the statue has a hand shaped like this, and it's pointing downward. So at Catholic Mass, the priest does the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So if the hand is pointing downwards, that's the Son, Jesus. Meanwhile, Loki has his hand in a hand position I can't do because I have really bad arthritis. We'll put it on screen. And that is a hand symbol that is commonly associated with Jesus in classical paintings. And the reason that these hand symbols exist is because back in the Renaissance medieval era, people didn't know how to read. So there needed to be some way to convey which random bearded guy in a fucking tunic was in a picture. So you had hand symbols for priests, you had hand symbols for Jesus, and they're there, and I got so excited by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know is Catholicism background for Kate Herron or any of the writers?
You know, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It really would not surprise me. I need to do more research. I would love to talk to one of the writers of this show.
Absolutely.
Because I genuinely feel like we have a lot in common. I just feel like we're queer and we grew up in a religious trauma background and bad things happened to us and then we did bad things to people, but we got better. So that's my theory. I think one of the writers on this staff has kind of gone through, or multiple of the writers, because things like complex PTSD, like narcissistic abuse, are just, they're written really well.
Yeah.
Like the way Ravonna speaks to Mobius in the later episodes, it's very narcissistic abuser.
Yeah.
But back to Jesus. In the Bible, there are two characters that betray Jesus. So you've got Judas Iscariot, very, very obvious. In order to get money, he kisses Jesus on the cheek at dinner, which reveals to the guards Jesus' identity. Because basically the guards were like, hey, we want to put Jesus to death. So you're going to, identify Jesus for us so we know who to arrest. And you're going to do that by kissing him. Which I think is funny. That's why I have to include that. Because I think that's funny.
Yeah.
So after he kisses Jesus on the cheek, Jesus, he gets arrested, and we kind of know what happens from there, why the whole cross thing is important. Judas is a very direct betrayal. For money, boom, betrays Jesus.
Right.
Then you've got Simon Peter. Simon Peter denies knowing Jesus 3 times before the cock crows. But afterwards, he feels bad about it, and he repents, and, he gets better. And I think there's one or two metaphors going on. Either Mobius is supposed to be Simon Peter, and Sylvie is supposed to be Judas Iscariot, or Sylvie is in a position right now where she can either become Judas Iscariot, she can go down a dark path, or she can realize what she's done wrong. She can realize how much she truly loves Loki, and then have a redemption of her own.
Yeah. I'm curious too if you could do the opposite read with Loki as Jesus and Kang as the devil tempting Jesus in the desert. With this tempting offer of I think at first it's like, hey, I'll just reinsert you back into the timeline, and then it's followed up with, well, you could just run all this shit if you want to. I think that is genuinely one of the devil's temptations, is like,
I'm pretty sure,
can't you just command everything here? Don't you own all this?
Is this yours?
Yeah, paraphrasing for the devil. And in that case, would Loki and Sylvie, and this is a more secular read on it, many messianic deities are represented with male and female in the same form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a god would be a fusion of the two personalities into one. And if that's the way you're supposed to read Loki Sylvie in that moment, is like they are the god being offered all of this from the devil.
Or man is incomplete without woman, which is another thing,
Yeah.
a common theme in the Bible. There's like so much biblical symbolism. Like I'm sure you noticed the type of fruit that Kang was eating.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, if you're really into YouTube, you'll recognize that CinemaSins eat an apple to look like an asshole on camera. That's one of their few contributions to things that I find funny in movies is character eats an apple, they must be the bad guy. But in the religious aspect, the apple's the knowledge of good and evil, which lines up with what I guess Kang's offering them. It's like the ultimate good of protecting the universe from more of Kang, with the ultimate evil of removing their free will.
Yeah. So in addition to the apple of knowledge with Kang, you also have this huge creation theme.
Yeah.
It was creepy rewatching episode 1. Oh, yeah, the TVA created us. And you're okay with that? I didn't really parse that the same way the first time. I'm like, oh, are you okay?
Yeah, exactly. Mobius is like comfortably numb within that. He's like, I'm not even going to question anything.
Yeah. But then you kind of see how people adapt to the insanity that is the TVA.
Yeah.
Which is a good point. I suspect that one of the reasons is because they entirely lack free will.
Yeah, kind of by design, the whole thing.
Yeah. I'm really curious because you came from a far more restrictive religious background than I did. Free will in your background, what is it? Stress? Like in Catholicism, that's really big.
Yeah, it's kind of tantamount within my sect. So there's within your, I guess you're kind of like general American Christianity. I've come from the more Pentecostal Assemblies of God subsect, and if you don't know, there's lots of infighting amongst the different miniature subsets of Christianity.
Such a mess.
One of them specifically being predestination versus the ability for someone to become a Christian at any moment and it still counts.
Yeah.
There's probably a term for that. I've just always heard it as I've learned it as like
I've always heard of the death toward Jesus loophole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Jesus loophole of like if Hitler cried out to Jesus just before he died, he could still get into heaven.
Yeah.
And wherever you land on that, I'm so far away from all that now. I wouldn't even care to have an opinion. But my upbringing was very much in the you can lose your salvation. Your free will is like one of God's greatest gifts, because when you choose to actively commune with God, worship with, then you are exercising the gift that he gave you back to him, and that's what rewards you. That's kind of what it is to be a Christian.
It makes Christian sense.
Yeah.
Catholicism, and this is something that I always got into a big argument with my religion teachers about, is there's this whole God knows everything, but also you have free will. And in my opinion, those two things cannot coexist.
Yeah.
You know, if he knows what you're going to do, you don't have control over it.
Right.
Especially if he's all powerful, that is always kind of screwed with me. And free will, like Loki hammers it. I didn't realize how much he hammers in the first episode. Just a couple quotes. At the very beginning, he's screaming because he's upset. He's going through one of the stages of grief, which is another video that we're going to do. And he says, "You ridiculous bureaucrats will not dictate how my story ends." To Mobius in the elevator, "The idea that your little club decides the fate of trillions of people throughout all existence at the behest of 3 space lizards, it's funny, it's absurd." That's not only a religious reference, it's a Trinity reference. It's double Catholic bingo. To right before Mobius shows him like the whole path to his death, from like everything that's going to happen to him, from Avengers to Endgame, he says, "I live with any path I choose." You know, Loki tells Mobius, I'll do what I want to do, and Mobius says, "You sure?" Like it's stressed so heavily, and I at first I was just thinking like, oh, it was because he's got a literal collar on his neck, and that collar is such an effective visual device because it shuts off that part of your brain that's like, why is he so controlling? Why is this conversation all about control? Because in my brain, the first time I interpreted this, I'm like, this is physical control. This is the collar. The second time, I was like, shit, this is like religion and free will and Kang and all of that being foreshadowed. All of that stuff is set into place before he even meets Sylvie, so you know it's not something that she implants in her mind. You know It's not her charming him. When she meets him, she's just building upon this desire for free will that he already had.
Well, and think about that across the MCU as well. Like, I know that's kind of we've been careful to separate that off as that is its own Loki character growth, just so that the show can kind of exist on its own legs. But man, I think about the end of Avengers. He literally is like muzzled. Before they go back to Asgard, and then in Dark World he's in his own purgatory in that prison that he presents one way, and that's just him using his powers just across the series. I mean, even in Thor Ragnarok, like there's an element of him like being under the thumb of the Grandmaster, and like he's always just like one step below, always being like hampered in some way.
And it always really does seem to bother him until he meets Sylvie.
Yeah.
And she's the one that he allows because, I think that she's the first one that's ever really truly been able to understand him, but that's a subject for another video. Trinities are really prevalent in this show.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about a few of them?
Sure. The one that stuck out to me the most was the first time the Timekeepers, which are a trinity of themselves, the first time they're revealed on screen is at 3 minutes and 33 seconds in the third episode. That to me was just like, in case you needed a clue that trinities were going to be important across this series, that was the clue.
Mm-hmm. There's all of these like spiral designs, like I don't know how to describe them. They're like a triad wave designs, almost reminiscent of like kind of a Celtic design that I've seen before, that are very prevalent throughout the episodes. When you get to the courthouse, Ravona's courthouse, first off, it's half 70s brutalist architecture, half a church. Like it's literally got pews. Behind her, the statues, 3 statues. It sets the scene so strongly of all of this religious underpinnings, and it's fascinating to me how few people are analyzing it that way.
Yeah,
I've read a ton of content about this, and I've seen a couple people pick up on some things, but it's really not something that I don't know if people just don't notice it because they don't have the same background, like they didn't go to Catholic school, but it's fascinating to me.
Also, part of it could be that like fewer and fewer people are going to church now to recognize that, and I know that these show creators are closer to our age and our generation, which church was still a big part of it. I mean, Vacation Bible School is just summertime babysitting. That's all it is.
Our parents were poor and they wanted to get rid of us.
Yep. For 5 glorious nights, 1 week in the summer.
So we have a church there, and we have a church there, and we have a church there, and they would never do it the same week. So I would be in Vacation Bible School half the fucking summer.
That's kind of the idea, though. I think some, especially some like smaller towns, plan it that way so they can like, oh, we're going to go to this church this week.
Especially like my parents, especially when we were growing up, like we're not rich people, and so when you are at that income level and surrounded by people at that income level, the society is kind of shaped more around that. So like the churches know, oh, these parents are going to need someplace to put their kids for a while.
Right.
And at the same time, we can probably get some donations and like some new members and whatever.
Yeah, it's societally, churches were, I think, built to help with those things, like to have your central meeting location and, to have childcare provided and to feed, food banks and churches are going to be linked forever because of that kind of stuff. So more trinities within the show. I think they've been kind of stuck in different places. Like even you look at like the way that the episodes kind of have laid out.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that it's almost like 2 films, duologies back to back,
much.
which would, each containing 3 episodes within them, and the 3s and 6s and the way that they all relate to each other. When you're planning a show out like this, I imagine a lot of those things, like you use those as kind of like, foundational columns that you can kind of build your story around.
Yeah.
You need 3 legs on something for it to be able to stand. Threes are easy to keep in mind. You don't have to remember too much. I think the average human memory can hold like 7 new pieces of information at any given time without lots of practice. So like 3 is very like, even if you're
Very
on the
easy.
bad side of
Even
memory.
a child, for the most part, can remember 3 things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and look at the way that children's TV shows are structured with like.
Fucking Dora the Explorer.
Yep.
3.
Exactly.
It's funny. Dora the Explorer is actually a really great way to run a D&D campaign. I saw that on Tumblr once. And I'm like, oh my god, this is brilliant. One other thing that stuck out to me. Do you know Footprints in the Sand?
Yep. I don't think I could quote it off the top of my head.
You don't need just a paraphrase.
Yeah. Oh man. When you look down in the sand, there was 2 sets of footprints, but then there was only one when
shit got hard.
When shit got hard, because that was Jesus carrying you.
Yep. Yeah. Loki says, "Where was the TVA when I was meddling with these affairs of men? Mobius, we were right there with you, just surfing the sacred timeline."
Yep.
I cackled. I cackled so hard.
We were with you the whole time.
Yep. That's the truth. Thank you so very much for joining us for this special limited show, Loki After Dark. We will be back for season 2 of Loki with Loki Sucks Dick, and also we have content for What If coming up available soon, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.
If you could also drop us a like and share this video out, that would be very helpful. And beyond that, for $1, you could help us out every single month on Patreon. It's patreon.com/MontressOrMedia. It gives you access to our entire library of extended episodes, stuff that you've never seen here on YouTube, as well as our Discord link, which you can probably find in the description for this as well. We have a hop-in Discord that we'd love to see you there. We'd love to talk to you there. I think my favorite channel in the Discord is Dick Butt, our meme channel, where you can just drop most memes.
Yeah.
Non-offensive memes.
Yeah. Also, the channel for Loki Sucks Dick is very popular right now because I post a lot of alligator Loki stuff there.
Yes, you do.
Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out a ton. Thank you so very much for watching and have a lovely day.